You begin with a firm division in mind. You and God. You act, you choose, you pray. God commands, receives, responds. The structure feels obvious. Yet the more closely you examine the you who acts, the less stable it appears. Thought shifts, mood shifts, role shift. What is the constant that says, I? Ibn Arabi entered at this point of doubt. He asked whether the self that claims independence is anything other than the one who gives it existence from moment to moment. If every instant of knowing depends on the real, is the self truly outside the real? You are invited into a different approach. Do not ask where God is located. Ask what the word you actually refers to. If you arise within divine awareness, in what sense could you be separate? Ibn Arabi, the Andalusian master of metaphysical insight, described reality as a continuous disclosure of the real. His writings did not provide a map to a distant realm. They analyzed how awareness knows itself here and now. He distinguished between statements about God and the immediate knowing in which such statements occur. For him, all beings are modes of the real self-knowledge, finite articulations of infinite possibility. The seeker's task is not to add beliefs, but to remove confusion about the nature of the self. If knowledge of God happens within divine being, how could a created self compete with or compare to its own ground? You assume the self owns its existence. You say, my life, my mind, my will. But consider the structure more carefully. Existence is not an item you acquire. It is the condition that makes any acquisition conceivable. Ibn Arabi explained that existence belongs solely to the real. Created forms receive it as participation, not possession. Your awareness is a way the real is aware. Your thinking is a way the real becomes intelligible in a finite mode. Recognizing this does not erase individuality. It clarifies its status. The self is dependent through and through. If the I is a recipient, not a proprietor, can there be a robust independence opposed to the one who donates being at every instant? You feel separate because the mind knows by distinction. It carves, labels, and compares. This is useful for action, but misleading for metaphysics. Distinction within awareness does not prove division of awareness. Ibn Arabi argued that the distance you sense between human and divine is conceptual, not real. It is produced by thought and sustained by language. The same awareness that seems to look outward is the awareness in which looking occurs. When you test this directly, you find no edge where awareness ends and something non-aware begins. If separation is a function of thinking, what remains when thinking is observed rather than obeyed? Ibn Arabi stated that creation arises from the divine will to be known. Each being is a locus in which a specific possibility of the real is brought to clarity. Yourself is one such locus. In this view, you are not a spectator of God, but a mode of God's self-recognition. The statement, I know God, inverts to, the real knows itself here. This does not elevate the human above the divine. It removes rivalry altogether. Knowing is not a line reaching across a gap. It is an activity of the one through finite form. If the real is both the knower and the known, who precisely could stand outside this process? Still, a counterforce persists, the ego. It consolidates identity through roles and memories. It prefers ownership to dependence. Ibn Arabi did not dismiss the ego as false. He located it as partial. It articulates a narrow selection of divine qualities: strength here, vulnerability there, intelligence here, while forgetting the rest. Taking the part as the whole, produces illusion. Recognition does not require the ego's destruction. It requires correct placement. The ego is a function of differentiation within unity. If the I that seeks is already a divine articulation, what remains to be defended, and what exactly is threatened by surrender? At the center of Ibn Arabi's teaching stands the unity of being. There are not two realities, creator and creation as competing substances. There is one existence, expressed in finite modes. Multiplicity is real as articulation, not as a second existence. From this follows a sober claim. Your consciousness is not other than the universal consciousness. It is a particular stance of it. The real is not contained by you. The real contains the capacity by which you appear. This clarifies devotion. Worship is not negotiation across a distance, but lucid acknowledgement of dependence. If all awareness belongs to one being, when you say, I am aware, who is the I? Recognition for Ibn Arabi is not built on argument but on witnessing. Reason cleans the path. Witnessing completes it. You test a simple shift. Instead of chasing objects of knowledge, you examine knowing itself. The witness, the act of witnessing, and what is witnessed are found to participate in one field. The more you attend, the less you find a separate owner of attention. This is not emotional exaltation. It is intellectual clarity. It does not abolish difference. It reveals difference as positions within unity. If awareness is constant and self-luminous, what distinguishes knower from known beyond a functional description? Ibn Arabi described the human as the comprehensive form, the site where the fullest range of divine qualities can appear together. Not because humans are superior by self-mastery, but because their awareness can hold opposites without collapse, mercy and rigor, power and humility, limitation and openness dot in such a capacity. The real contemplates its completeness. Self-knowledge and God-knowledge converge. Your clarity about your own limits becomes clarity about the infinitude that grounds them. Thus, self-study, when honest, is already theology in action. If every attribute that moves through you belongs to the real, what does the word mine capture beyond temporary arrangement? As recognition stabilizes, the figure of the separate seer thins. Thoughts continue, choices continue, relations continue, yet the felt center of ownership loosens. Ibn Arabi called this completion of self-knowledge. The disappearance here is not annihilation but accuracy. The system functions without the fiction of an isolated proprietor. You notice a practical effect. Responsibility remains, but it is no longer burdened by self-importance. Action serves clarity rather than identity maintenance. Gratitude replaces entitlement because existence is seen as given rather than earned. When no observer stands apart, does the word union still describe a merger, or does it simply name the fact of awareness? Realization does not withdraw you from life. It reorients participation. Ibn Arabi explained that every act becomes remembrance when performed from dependence rather than separation. Work becomes service. Speech becomes testimony. Relationship becomes mutual transparency. The real addressing the real through finite expressions. Discipline remains, but its motive shifts from acquisition to fidelity. You are not trying to gain nearness. You are confirming that nearness was never absent. Devotion and existence cease to stand apart. If all action is divine activity passing through finite forms, what would it mean to add holiness except to notice what is already at work? You return to the starting question: how to recognize yourself in God? The answer is not a technique, but a correction. The self you defended as independent was a function within the One. Your awareness is God's knowledge of a specific possibility occurring now. Nothing dramatic follows. Comprehension deepens. The division between my knowing and God's knowing gives way to a single act of knowing. Seeking relaxes, not from fatigue, but from accuracy. Ibn Arabi's sacred truth stands clear. There has never been anything but the real, expressing itself in finite modes. To recognize yourself in God is to recognize that there is no you apart from this recognition. In this clarity, thought rests. Awareness remains unbroken, sufficient. Awake. The reflection begins with a presumed separation between self and God. Through Ibn Arabi's analysis, that presumption weakens. The self is seen as recipient, not proprietor. Separation as conceptual, not real. Creation is understood as the real self-knowing, with the ego functioning as a partial expression rather than an enemy. Unity of being reframes consciousness as a particular stance of universal awareness. Recognition proceeds through witnessing, not argument, and dissolves the image of an isolated seer. Life continues as remembrance, action without rivalry, devotion without distance. The journey closes in intellectual stillness. Nothing to merge, nothing to add, only the One knowing itself through the form once called you.